then just loosen your belts and possibly your bodices and relax and let your minds come on a little adventure with me with three old friends. Now, these three friends lived in the same town in that little old island that some people still mistakenly call England. Let me introduce you first to Mr. Rosenstein. Rosenstein in English means pink stone. And as you probably guessed, he was not English. In fact, Rosenstein was a Jewish art dealer and collector who specialized in very early Greek and Roman marble statues. Now, his pride was a very rare collection of pink marble statues, which is rather a coincidence if you consider his name, Rosenstein, but maybe it wasn't. Rosenstein traded from his own large living room, where he kept and lived amongst his precious collection of marble statues. Rosenstein had a very good friend whose name was Rosemary Sage. Now, Rosemary Sage was a herbalist, of course. And Rosemary Sage was a very elderly and rather disheveled person, but her mind was as sharp as the thorns on the wild acacia that had sprung up in her little untidy back garden. She, when asked, would take a pinch of herb or a leaf and put it under a formidable Roman nose, utter an enormous snort, and then acclaim with absolute certainty, rosemary, thyme, or sage, or parsley, and then serve her customers. You see, her eyesight was not very good, and those bottle-thick glasses perched on that nose rather magnified her eyes rather than her vision. She grew most of her herbs in that little back garden, but sadly business was getting thinner and thinner because of competition from the big supermarkets. Furthermore, because of her ebbing strength and eyesight, her supply was getting thin as well, especially her much sought-after thyme. The third character in this intrepid trio was none other than Mr. Chipwood, would you believe? Now, he was a cabinet maker, of course, and his passion was to use only handheld tools with real boxwood handles. They were traditional tools, and he carried them in quite a large homemade wooden toolbox wherever and whenever he had to work. What did I tell you his name was? His name was Chip Oakwood. I think the wine must have had something. Chip Oakwood. Now, Chip Oakwood's pride was a very special antique wooden smoothing plane, which he sharpened with great care and precision, using only the very, very best oilstones available. He had fitted out Rosemary Sage's shop, which was in fact a living room, and he had also made special little wooden platforms, or let's say daises, for some of Rosenstein's statues. They're all friends. In fact, they were all members of the same international Toastmasters International Club. It was a very traditional English club, where you had to wear a jacket and a tie, except if you're a lady, of course. One year, Christmas was approaching, rather like tonight. And they were going to prepare for the club's Christmas gala. Rosenstein and Rosemary Sage were going to spend Christmas at home. But Chip Oakwood was going to fly off to see his daughter overseas with his baggage, with his precious toolbox, and that very, very special wooden smoothing plane. The club's gala night was going to start, and in fact, he had very, very reluctantly sent his baggage with the toolbox and the smoothing plane off to check in at the airport before the meeting. And Rosemary Sage very, very kindly had offered to take them all to the airport immediately after the meeting in order to see Chipwood off very safely. The club Christmas special was a marvellous meeting, tremendous. Nearly all the members turned up. There were loads of visitors. The food was excellent. And the introductions, the compliments, the speeches, the very positive evaluations, and the compliments all flowed as freely as the wine. There were three main speakers, and would you believe who they were? Rosenstein, Rosemary Sage, and Oakwood. And when the votes were counted, do you know what? They all came third, which means that they all won, of course. And they proudly stood up to the front to receive their blue and gold ribbons. That called for even more celebration. Finally, after many, many toasts, many raised and down glasses, and thousands of well-dones and Merry Christmases, they staggered and struggled into Rosemary Sage's car, which bounced and swerved off towards the airport. Rather sadly, Rosemary Sage forgot where she was going, and she headed home. Not to her house, but straight into her garden, and she ploughed through her own vegetable and herb patch. Absolutely bewildered, she jerked the car violently back onto the road and sped off at speed to Rosenstein's house, where she crashed and finally came to a halt bang in the middle of his living room. Rosenstein had an apoplectic fit. The devastation was terrible. Chip Oakwood's plane flew off very, very smoothly without him. Rosenstein completely lost his marbles. And Rosemary Sage sadly ran out of time. But they did have a smashing Christmas. By the way, if you're planning to drive this Christmas, do be careful with the drinks, won't you?
Very dramatic, wonderful speech.